Lightning has struck me all my life. Just once it was real. They say I was a quiet, sickly child before the storm, but after it I grew up lively and alert. The memory of that lightning still runs through me like a shiver. It marks powerful moments of my life. I feel an echo of the lightning each time I find a fossil. A little jolt that says, "Yes, Mary Anning, you are different from all the rocks on the beach."
Mary Anning was born on May 21st, 1799 in coastal Lyme Regis. This area of England was struck hard by the Napoleonic Wars, resulting in poverty and high infant mortality. Mary and her older brother Joseph were the only 2 out of 10 children born to Richard and Molly Anning who survived childhood. As a baby, Mary survived a lightning strike that killed 3 others. Although a cabinet maker by trade, Richard had a passion for fossil hunting. Mary loved accompanying her father and learning how to hunt for, excavate, and prepare fossils. In the early 1800s, fossils were called curiosities because no one quite knew what they were. Many found them disturbing, calling them serpent stones and devil's fingers. Fossil hunting itself was dangerous. Between harsh weather and storms, rock slides, and rising tides, it was a dangerous way to make a living. Tragedy struck when Richard Anning, aged 44, died after falling off a cliff. Mary was 10 years old, Joseph was 15, and Molly was pregnant. The family was left in debt and had to rely more on selling fossils. In 1811, Mary's brother Joseph found a skull that did not look like any animal ever seen before. A year later, when Mary was 11 years old, she found the body of the fossil. The fossil was sold to a landowner for £23, enough to feed their family for half a year. The landowner was given the credit for the find when he donated the fossil to William Bullock for display in his museum. It created a sensation. Everyone referred to it as a crocodile. The idea of one of God's creatures going extinct was unfathomable. It was not named until 1817.
Mrs. Stock's the first person I've come across who supported Mary Anning because she, in 1813 or about, gave her the first geology book. And again, we've got this problem about Mary's education. She was incredibly intelligent. There's no doubt at all she realised what was possible.
Mary studied geology and anatomy and dissected animals in her spare time. Her self-taught knowledge elevated her position in the scientific community. She began leading scholars on fossil hunts, including Henry de la Beach, who would serve as president of the Geological Society, and William Buckland, the first professor of geology at Oxford. Mary also led Colonel Birch, a fossilist, on hunts. During one of his visits, he found the family preparing to sell their furniture to pay the rent. Realizing the importance of Mary to the scientific community, he decided to sell off his collection for the Annings, and gave Mary the credit for finding almost all of it. An auction was held in the Egyptian Hall at Bullock's Museum in London, drawing a record crowd from across Europe. Over £400 was raised for the Annings, and Mary delved deeper into the developing science of paleontology. Mary Anning shocked the scientific community by finding a 9-foot-long, 6-foot-wide skeleton with a very small head that did not look like any living animal. It was described as a shellless turtle. This Plesiosaurus gigantus would become the type specimen, serving as a reference for all future finds for this specimen. Upon seeing a sketch of this creature, Cuvier, the father of paleontology, accused her of fraud. A special meeting of the Geological Society was held to discuss her findings. The meeting took place behind closed doors without Mary, as women were denied membership. Upon seeing the fossil, Cuvier acknowledged that he was wrong. Mary began dissecting items referred to as bezoar stones. She discovered they were fossilized feces and shared her discovery with Buckland.
Mary was really the first person who looked inside coprolites and saw the remains of fish with scales and bone. The study of coprolites tells you key information about an animal's diet and predation habits. Mary Anning's dedication and observation showed that there's great scientific value in looking at even trivial things.
By this time, the concept of extinction was still not acceptable. However, the fossils being found were unlike any living animals, and so, the prevalent belief was that God put fossils into the ground. With Mary discovering fossilized feces, it was difficult for people to make this argument. At the age of 29, Mary discovered the first flying reptile found in England. Buckland reported to the Geological Society. Miss Mary Anning has recently found the skeleton of an unknown species of the most rare and curious of all reptiles, the pterodactyl. Mary discovered a new genus of fossil fish, Squaloraja. Geologists proclaimed her find to be an ancient ray, but Mary disagreed, and so she dissected a modern ray to prove that her fossil was a fish of a new species. This find would also become the type specimen. Mary Anning corresponded with Charles Lyell, describing the effects of the sea on the coast of Lyme Regis. Lyell wrote Principles of Geology, in which he made the argument that over long periods of time, the Earth's surface has been changed gradually. Charles Darwin brought Lyell's book with him on the voyage aboard the Beagle.
Mary Anning's work was actually instrumental in demonstrating that there was an ancient time that had ancient creatures that were very different than what we find today in the oceans. And that started to turn people's thoughts towards an ancient world and trying to figure out where these creatures might have come from and ultimately where they went.
Mary's friend and colleague, Henry de la Beach, painted the very first example of paleo art. The painting depicted what prehistoric life might have looked like based on the fossils that Mary Anning had discovered.
It's an incredible achievement to think that she was responsible for a great deal of the discoveries that scientists put the flesh and bones on, if you like. And some people have said that Mary Anning couldn't have done anything because she was merely a woman. And I think this is doing a total disservice to what she actually managed to do.
Mary wrote to Buckland announcing a new species. I write to inform you that in the last week I discovered a young Plesiosaurus. It is without exception the most beautiful fossil I have ever seen. The head is twice as large in proportion as those I have hitherto found. Although never to marry, Mary found a faithful companion in her dog Trey, and she even trained him to guard her fossil finds if she had to temporarily leave the site. Mary described the tragic death of Trey. The death of my old faithful dog has quite upset me. The cliff fell upon him and killed him in a moment before my eyes and close to my feet. It was but a moment between me and the same fate. Tragedy struck a final and fatal blow in 1845 when Mary discovered that she had breast cancer. She died 2 years later at the age of 47. In his presidential address of the Geological Society, Mary's childhood friend, Henry de la Beach, gave his customary tribute to those fellows who had died in the past year. Mary Anning, born a poor Victorian woman, had earned such a high level of respect in the scientific community that she would be the first woman to ever be given a eulogy by the Geological Society. The society would not admit women for another 57 years.
She actually ended up running a fossil shop, owning her own business. That's an incredible achievement for an uneducated Victorian woman. She couldn't join the societies that were men only, and she couldn't write scientific papers. But considering her birth, she actually did hugely well.
In the years since Mary Anning's death, her legacy has lived on in a variety of ways. Lyme Regis Parish dedicated a stained glass window to honor her.
One of the most remarkable people in the history of paleontology is Mary Anning. Mary Anning is the person that is the inspiration for the rhyme, "She sells seashells by the seashore."
In 2009, the Royal Society named Mary Anning as among the top 10 most important women who made the greatest influence in the field of science. During her lifetime, Mary was not given credit for her 5 major scientific discoveries.
Part of the social stratification of England that you didn't, in England, name fossils after a woman. The world has woken up to her importance, and she's now really got quite a lot of things named after her, including at last an ichthyosaur called Ichthyosaurus anningi.
The Museum of Natural History in London has her ichthyosaur, plesiosaur, and dimorphodon on display, with Mary Anning receiving credit for the finds.
Scientists working today, if you want to know if you've got a new species, you have to come here and look at Mary's fossils to find out whether yours is new or yours is one of hers.
Mary Anning's legacy continues to drive tourists to visit Lyme Regis. In July 2017, Lyme Regis Museum completed the building of the new Mary Anning Wing. The town of Lyme Regis keeps Mary's legacy strong by hosting an annual festival to celebrate her triumphs. Mary Anning faced a lifetime of tragedies. Despite being born into poverty at a time when women were neither permitted to attend universities nor belong to professional organizations, she took the science world by storm. Through her determination and hard work, she transformed fossil hunting from a hobby to a science, triumphed in the developing field of paleontology, and helped lay the groundwork for Darwin's theory of evolution. Mary Anning paved the way for women and changed the face of science forever.